Mhm. Welcome, everyone. Hello, welcome to the hands-on workshop about modernizing web forms applications using .vvm. Uh, Feel free to unmute yourself at any time if you want to have any questions. So let's make this more a discussion. I have few slides prepared for you just to introduce the topic and explain the principles how you can use .vvm alongside with web forms in the same application, and how you can use .vvm for modernizing. And in the second part, I hope that it will start soon. I don't want to bore everyone with long stories and long talking, so we can download a sample project from GitHub and try to install .vvm in the project and use .vvm alongside with the web forms. So I hope that the demo will work for you if you have Visual Studio installed with the .vvm extension. It is great. If you weren't able to make all the things running, don't worry. I will be showing all the steps you will need so you can try them later. And of course, we will be happy to help you. So what exactly is .vvm? So .vvm is an open source framework for making web applications. It's a member of .NET Foundation. It's written in .NET. And I think that the most or the main characteristic of this framework is that it is using the MVVM approach. So the model view model pattern is used everywhere in this framework. And the framework is basically an extension for ASP.NET. And we are supporting both old ASP.NET on .NET Framework and also ASP.NET Core. So you can use .vvm in quite old projects based on .NET, and also you can use .vvm in with the newest version of ASP.NET Core. So it's very the support is very wide, and basically there is no .NET application that wouldn't be compatible with .vvm. From the .NET developer perspective, .vvm is just a NuGet package. So we have packages .vvm.owin and .vvm.ASP.NET Core. Based on the platform you are using, you just install this NuGet package. So the distribution of the framework fits in the .NET ecosystem. So there are two main scenarios for which you can use .vvm. First is building new web apps. So if you want to start with web development, or if you want to try something new, you can use .vvm. And especially if you have experience with a model view model, for example, from Xamarin or from WPF, .vvm will be very easy for anyone to learn because there is the MVVM approach, and most of the components are named the similar way as in WPF or in ASP.NET or other technologies on .NET. And also there is a second scenario which we will be talking about today, and it's modernizing old web forms apps, because Microsoft announced that ASP.NET Web Forms won't be extended, won't be getting new features, and won't be supporting .NET Core. But there's still plenty of web forms applications that still needs to be developed. They need to be extended with new features, and .vvm allows to transition from .NET Framework to .NET Core. So that's what we will be talking about today. So on this workshop, we will basically take a sample application that was written in ASP.NET Web Forms. We will download it from GitHub, and we will integrate .vvm in the project. So we will install some NuGet packages, make some configuration changes, and we will build our first page in .vvm in a way that it could coexist with the rest of the application. And if you will have any questions or problems or issues, just unmute yourself and ask. And at any time, you can also use the chat. So if you, for example, if you don't have a good microphone or you have a noisy office or something like that, you can also click through the chat and you can ask there. I will be also posting some links to the chat, so you can follow what's being done here. Okay. So what we will need, I have sent the email with instructions previously, but just to recap, you will need any edition of Visual Studio 2019. .vvm works with the community edition, which is free, but also with the commercial editions, it should work. It's a good thing to install the latest updates to Visual Studio because the .vvm extension is typically supporting the latest releases of Visual Studio. If you are on some older update of Visual Studio 2019, there can be some things that we won't be fixing because the new release of .vvm extension for Visual Studio always supports the latest updated Visual Studio because the Visual Studio is changing some things in their code editor, and .vvm needs to integrate with this. So it's very difficult to cover all the updates of Visual Studio because the API is still changing. And also, if you haven't installed .vvm for Visual Studio, just go to .vvm.com/install, and there is a link from the Visual Studio Gallery or Visual Studio Marketplace where you can download the extension. It's free. And if you want to try all the nice features we have built in, you can also request a trial version. Just register on .vvm.com and create an account, and there is a button where you can activate your 30 days trial version. If you want more time to test all the features, let me know. I can extend the trial for you. And it's not necessary. If you don't want to commit to anything, you can just use the free version. There's no need to register, nothing like that, and it will work for everything we will be doing today. If you want to do some serious stuff with .vvm, this commercial version can make you much more productive. So the story behind this modernization scenario is that we have a lot of applications that are still maintained and developed, and they are written in ASP.NET Web Forms. And most of the applications I have seen, they have been developed for more than 10 years. So it's a tremendous amount of work. The applications typically contain hundreds of pages and hundreds of SQL tables in the database. And it's very difficult to rewrite such applications because it would take a lot of time. The applications contains a lot of features. Nobody remembers how they work, why they are there. But everything is used, so anytime you touch something, something else can break. So it's very difficult, and I think that if something was developed for 10 years, it will take at least half of that time to rewrite it with preserving all the functionality. So it's very difficult to rewrite these applications. Of course, it depends on the company that is using the application, because if the business has also changed, it may be wise to just start from scratch and to build a different application that will replace the original one. But in some scenarios, the application is just okay, but it's full of legacy code. It's not using the technologies that are supported today. So basically, the users want still the same application, but they want new features, and they want the application, for example, to look more modern. But the application itself is quite okay. So that's the case where the modernization can be a good way, because it's not so difficult to use .vvm and build new pages, which will be more interactive, more responsive, and it doesn't mean that you need to rewrite a lot of code. So the complete rewrite is useful in some cases, especially if the new application should be significantly different from the old one. But if you want to keep things slowly, you can just use the modernization path. So what about moving to .NET Core? Web forms are not supported on .NET Core, and Microsoft announced that they never will be. So if you have web forms applications, you need to stay at .NET Framework. Which means that you won't be getting new features of the C# language, because they need some new features of .NET Runtime that are present only in .NET Core. You won't be able to use the new improvements in, for example, NuGet packages. So because NuGet on .NET Core is much faster, much more convenient than on the .NET Framework, where installing any package takes a lot of time. So there are a lot of improvements in the build tools, in the ecosystem, and if you stay on .NET Framework, it will work, and .NET Framework is not going anywhere, but a lot of things are much less convenient than with .NET Core. So this can be one of the reasons to move to .NET Core, just to be able to use or to take benefit from all the improvements Microsoft put in .NET Core. Also, there might be some security concerns because, for example, some kinds of authentication are supported on .NET Core, and they will be maintained to satisfy all the security standards. But on the .NET Framework, the new versions of protocols and things like that, they will be there eventually, but it might take more time because it's much more difficult for Microsoft to get these new features into .NET Framework. So if you want to go from web forms to .NET Core, you need to basically replace web forms with something else. And if you don't want to rewrite the entire application, you just need to replace all the ASPX pages and the user controls and things that are dependent on web forms. There can be also a lot of business logic, for example, using Entity Framework or something like that. This can stay as is because it's supported on .NET Core, but the presentation framework, the presentation layer, needs to be replaced with something else. And there are a lot of technologies that compete today. You can use Angular, React, Blazor, and typically you will use these technologies if you want to do a rewrite, because in Angular and React, most of the code is written in JavaScript or TypeScript. So we are talking about a very different approach. Blazor is using ASP.NET Core. So you can, of course, use Blazor, but also more for the rewriting perspective, because Blazor cannot be run side by side with the web forms things in the same application. You can have two applications running next to each other on different URLs or something like that, but then you will need to do the single sign-on, for example, and there's a lot of pieces that can make problems. So it's possible to do modernization even with Angular, React, or Blazor, but it's more difficult because you will be running two applications and you need to integrate them for the authentication, for caching, and there's a lot of code that will need to be shared. So if you choose different technology, in most cases, you will probably want to do a full rewrite of the application because the technologies are very different. With .vvm, of course, you can do a rewrite, but .vvm allows to do the modernization way also. Okay, so .vvm helps because we have two versions of .vvm, the ASP.NET Core version and Oven version. And these packages are just tiny layers that integrate .vvm with the ASP.NET Core or with the ASP.NET pipeline. But both these packages depend on the package that is called .vvm, and it's the same on both platforms, and it contains the entire framework. So the framework itself is the same. It's targeting .NET Standard, so you can use it from any version of .NET. And there are just differences in the ASP.NET Core and the Oven packages, but this is a very tiny layer. These packages just contains few classes, so it's not a big deal. 99% of the code base of .vvm is the same on both platforms. And this is great because if you write some pages and some view models in .vvm, there will be basically no changes in them if you transition from .NET Framework to .NET Core. The syntax, everything, all the APIs, they are the same. And the only changes basically are in the startup CS, which is the initial configuration of the application and plugging all the frameworks in the request pipeline. So it's very easy to do. And I have created some animation that should demonstrate the process. So if you imagine you have a web forms application and it gets some HTTP request, then the server gets the HTTP request. It goes to the ASP.NET Web Forms pipeline. Probably there is some authentication. For example, in web forms, most commonly, everybody was using the forms authentication. And the request is going to some SPX page, which is probably using some master page. And this will handle the request and render the response for the client. If the server gets another request, it will be probably routed to another ASPX page, but still it will go through the web forms pipeline and through the forms authentication. And if we want to integrate .vvm in this application, we need to do a couple of things. We need to install new NuGet packages. So we will install .vvm.owin, and we will also install Microsoft Owin host system web. So these are two packages. First is .vvm version for Owin, and the second is an Owin pipeline, which will get integrated with the ASP.NET Web Forms pipeline. Basically, it will wrap the ASP.NET Web Forms pipeline. And basically, the scenario is that if there is some request that is handled by Web Forms, so it will get to Owin. And if Owin itself cannot handle it, it will pass it along to the Web Forms pipeline. So basically, if you install these two packages, nothing will change. All the requests will still go to the Web Forms. And so then we have another request, and it would be routed to another page. And now we can, but we have Owin, and we can create a .vvm page. So we can, for example, take some ASPX page and start rewriting it. So I have took this page and move it to some background, or removed it, or rename it, or something like that. And I have created a copy of the master page written in .vvm syntax. The syntax is a little bit different. We will see in a few minutes, but basically the concept is the same. It's a template for defining the layout and header and footer menu and things like that. And then there are normal pages which get embedded in the master page to some specific place. So this .html file is basically a page in .vvm, and it stands in front of the ASPX page. So when we get an HTTP request to some web forms page, it will go as normally as usual. But if we get the request to the new page, it will be routed through the Owin pipeline through to the .html file, and it will use the .vvm version of the master page. And if we will use the same CSS, the user may not even notice that is using a different application. Basically, everything will look the same, and we will see it in a couple of minutes. So that's it. And now then we can. So this is the modernization in progress. So some pages are still in web forms, and some pages are written in .vvm. And this is great because the application is still working. This part is unchanged, so everything works as before. And you can take this application and deploy a new version. So you can constantly fix issues. You can constantly add new features. You can add new pages in web forms part, in .vvm part. It doesn't matter. Both pages coexist in the same application, and they are using the same authentication. So if the user, if one of these pages is the login page and the user logs in, even in the .vvm part, the user will be logged in, so you can read the information about the user and you can communicate with this. And it doesn't matter if the user logs in the web forms part or in the .vvm part. So at some point you can migrate the login page from web forms to .vvm, but the identity is shared between these two frameworks because still we are going through the forms authentication middleware, so it will work. If you would have two separate applications, you would need to do something to make sure that the user identity is shared between two applications. In this scenario with .vvm Owin and Microsoft Owin Host System Web, you get this single sign-on experience for free. You don't need to do anything about it. And so now the modernization can continue. So you pick page by page and you replace them with .html versions of the page. And you will see that the syntax is a little bit different, and you need to take the code behind of the pages and rewrite, refactor them into view models. But I think that it takes just 1 hour or maybe less for some simpler pages to take an ASPX page and rewrite it in .vvm. So if you imagine how many pages you have, and imagine that you can, after migration, you can deploy at any time, it's doable, and you will still be able to run and fix issues in this old part of the application. And also you can make some A/B testing. For example, you don't need to replace these pages. They can still exist together. So you can display some pop-up to the users. Okay, we have new version of the page. Do you want to try it? And if the user says, yes, I want to try it, so you can redirect the user to a new version of the page. So even the old and new version can stay in the same application side by side. So still the requests to the old pages will go through the web forms pipeline. Requests to the .vvm part will go just through the OWIN pipeline and be routed to .vvm. So it will run and work side by side. And eventually you will get rid of all ASPX pages. So now all the requests are handled by .vvm. And at this point, you can remove the ASPX pages and master page, and now the application is running only .vvm. So what next? What's next? Now you can move to .NET Core, because it's this bottom part. It's the same on .NET Framework and .NET Core. So probably in this part, there will be no changes in the code at all. You just need to replace the .vvm.owin package with the .vvm ASP.NET Core package. You can set target framework to .NET Core. And in this case, this web forms pipeline will disappear, and you will have the ASP.NET Core request pipeline. And you will need to redo the authentication, because forms authentication is very old. It's not available in .NET Core. There is something similar, which is called cookies authentication. So you will just configure the cookies authentication, and that's it. So you will, during the migration to .NET Core, you will need to also redo the authentication, but it's not very difficult. Actually, it's quite easy. It's just a few changes in the startup CS file. It's typically on one place in the application. So that's the scenario. And now you are running on .NET Core. And of course, you just need to rewrite the ASPX pages. If you have some business layer or a lot of code with application logic, this can remain as is. Of course, if you are using something that is not supported on .NET Core, you will need to fix it. But most of the things that were available in .NET Framework, for example, like Entity Framework 6 or things like that, it's already supported on .NET Core. So it should be pretty easy. There may be some changes, but it shouldn't be anything significant. So now all the requests are routed through the ASP.NET Core pipeline, through the ASP.NET Core authentication middlewares to .vvm pages. So that's how the migration works. And the greatest benefit is that at any time, the application is working, so you can take it and deploy it to the server. So because the most critical thing in the rewrite strategy is that the application is not ready, and there are several months or maybe years when you are building new application, but still the data are in the old application, the users are using the old application, and it's very difficult to run these applications side by side. Yeah, and it takes a lot of time until the new application has enough features that can be used at least by some users. So this allows more transient, more smoother migration or modernization and eventual moving to .NET Core. So basically, we will be rewriting ASPX pages, ASCX user controls, and master pages to .vvm. The syntax is different, but many concepts are very similar. And we will need to refactor the code behind files into view models. So basically, there will be some event handlers, for example, button, click, and things like that. We will need to refactor it so it will be represented in the MVVM way, which is also some work that needs to be done. But on the other hand, it very helps to make the application testable, because the view model can be automatically tested by some integration tests. You can just create a new instance of the view model, set some properties, call some methods, and make sure it works. And you don't need to run the browser. So the tests are very fast, and it's a very convenient way for testing of web applications. So this is a good thing, because you will get rid of some legacy burdens that are in the application, and overall code quality can be significantly improved. So it's some work to be done, but hopefully it won't be so bad. And still, there will be probably a lot of other code you don't need to touch at all, because it will still work on .NET Framework and .NET Core. So it's rewrite of some tiny part of the application. Sometimes it can be half of the application, but it's not the entire application. The only problem is if you have been using the data source controls like SQL data source in the ASPX markup, because the more the business logic is spawned in the presentation layer in the individual pages, the more difficult the refactoring into the view models will be, because you will need to take the SQL data source control and extract the SQL queries and move them somewhere else. So if the business logic is separated from the UI, it will be very easy. If the business logic is involved in the pages and in the code behind files, it will be more difficult to do. But still, this is also an opportunity to make the code much cleaner. So while doing this, you can just take the business logic and separate it from the UI. And it's a great thing to do, because it very helps with the maintenance of the application. It makes a lot of things easier in the future. So that was the theoretical part, and I hope that I wasn't so boring, but now let's do some code. So now this is the time where you will be able to try those things yourself. So the first thing, and I will try to copy this link and paste it to the chat. I hope that it will work. So you will be able to display the chat. So here's the chat somewhere, hopefully. So I will post the link here. A little bigger. Okay, no problem. So I can display it. If you cannot see the chat, you can just write it in the browser. Is bit.ly/37m capital E C Q and capital G. And does the link work for you? Were you able to get to the chat?
We didn't get the link in the chat.
Awesome. So you should see this GitHub repo, correct? Yeah. So the link should go to.
Once again, chat is available only to team members, not to guests. So you can.
Oh, sorry about that. So there are two things you can do. You can just try to type this link, or you can go to. I will try to keep the link displayed. So this is the. This is the link, And also the other way how to do it is go to github.com. Oh, sorry, /Riganti, and the first repo that will be there should be this one because it was changed a few minutes ago. So if you go to github.com/Riganti, then you should be able to go to the repo. It should be the first repo you will see there. So hopefully, I don't know why it takes so long to load. Strange. Yeah, so if you go to github.com/Riganti, it's the first repo that is listed here. Yeah, so it's the other way if you don't want to type this link anywhere. Sorry about that. The chat is not accessible. I don't know. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, so have you been able to go to find the repo?
You can go proceed further.
Okay, so I hope that I'm not sure if I cannot somewhere enable the chat for everyone, but it doesn't look like there is an option to do that. So sorry about that. I hope that you will be able to find the repo. So once again, github.com/Riganti, and it's the first repo we have here. So there are some things you can do. First is that there is in the README there is the slide deck, so you can open the slide deck or download it. So if I will be doing the steps that you should do too. So if I hide the slides and show the Visual Studio, and you want to look in the slides, so you can do it using this. Then you will need this second link, which is the gist with the code snippets I will be pasting in the Visual Studio. So make sure you open this in a new tab in the browser because these are all the code samples we will need. I'm not sure why my internet connection is so slow. I hope that the sound is okay. This is really slow. I don't know why. And there is the third link we will need in a few minutes, so you can also open it, and hopefully we will be able to use it. It's a converter where you can paste the ASPX markup, and it can do some transformations. So it can convert some parts of the markup to .vvm equivalent. So it's not 100% bulletproof. There's still a lot of things in the web forms that are not supported in this converter. So there will be some manual steps you will need to do, but it can help with some conversions. So we will be using it. Okay, now this is the gist, and the structure of this is basically a collection of code snippets. So I will be using this code snippets, and they are linked from the slides. So you will just take some code from there and paste it to the project. So keep this open because you will need it if you want to repeat the steps after me. So this is it. Okay. So let's start with the first thing. So first task is to start the Visual Studio and clone the repository. So you can just use the URL of the repo, this one. And if you start Visual Studio, you should see this screen. So there is a button, clone a repository. So you can click on it, and clone it to some local path on your disk. So just paste the URL of the repo here and select some local path, and Visual Studio should download the source codes and load the project. And if you have any questions or anything, any problems, just unmute and tell us what's the problem, that you have some problem, that you need some assistance. Okay. So you just paste the URL of the repo here, and you can choose some local path, or you can use the default one and click on this clone. So it will download the source code and open in Visual Studio. Okay. So I have already done this, so I will close this window. You need to click on the clone. But I've already done this, so the result should look like this. My project is loading, and it's basically, the project is one of a sample applications Microsoft provided for some certifications about ASP.NET Web Forms. So it's quite old. If you run the application, it looks like from year 2005 or something like that. But it's a nice demo of how the Web Forms applications can look, what features they contain, what technologies they are using, and we will use .vvm in this application. So by now the source code should be cloned, and Visual Studio should try to open the project. So I hope that you see something like this, and I can try to just run the project. So if you press F5, it should try to build a solution and run the project in browser. And hopefully you should be able to run it right away without any changes. I have tried it on several devices and it worked for me, so I was able to just clone the source code and run the project, but it's using the database, it's using SQL Server. It should be the local DB instance that is installed with the Visual Studio, so I hope that it will start automatically and it will work. But if you see some error page that the database is not ready, just unmute and let me know so I can help. So now it's launching, and I have a new browser window should be open. So this is here.
Please reshare the link for the repository.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is this one. If you go to github.com/Riganti, it should be the first repo that is listed there. So
okay, thank you.
No problem. You're welcome. Yeah, so this is the first repo, and you just get this URL, and or you can just click here, clone or download, and maybe there is also open in Visual Studio. So this is another way how you can do it. It should do the same thing. Okay, so I will switch to the other browser. I will keep this URL at the top here, so you can see it. The first run of the application will be a little bit slow because it will be creating some databases on the background, so it can take half a minute or something like that. But the next time it should be faster. It's strange. It shouldn't be that slow. I've tried it before this workshop, and it was a little bit faster, but it also looks like that the browser is maybe slower. Maybe the screen sharing slows things down because also the Visual Studio is not responding. It's awesome. I really love this. Okay, so has anybody have you been able to download the source code and open in Visual Studio?
Yes, yes.
Awesome, great.
Yes, it also works for me.
Awesome. Okay, I can try to stop the camera because it may be slowing things down. This is a little bit strange. I don't know what happens to the Visual Studio, so I will try to restart it. And do it again. Okay, so okay, so if you have downloaded the project, can you? Is it running? If you run it, do you see the home screen of the application?
Yes, it took like half a minute to load, but yes, it works.
Okay. So it works at least to someone. So if if my Visual Studio is freezing, you can share your screen. Okay, so now the project was loaded, so that's a great thing. So, okay, so I can try to run it again. Hopefully it will work this time. Okay, it's still doing something, so hopefully. It's just slow on my machine. I don't know why, but it's still loading some libraries. Oh, now we have the home page. So do you see the same screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is the application. You can click on some links to make sure it's working. So this is listing the products in the database. On the first run, the application is creating the databases. So that's why the first run is slower. The next run should be quite fast. So for example, there are some cars, so I can buy some car. And I can see now the shopping cart, and also in the menu, there is the number of items that are in my shopping cart. So this is one thing you can try. And so we are able to connect to the database because the list of the toys is loaded from the database. And also there should be a way for logging in. So I can click on this screen and try to log in, and also it should work. The credentials are admin, and the password is password with capital P and the $ instead of S letters. So PA $$ word. I will show it. So that's the default password for the admin user. It's created when the application starts the first time. So capital PA $, and word, just with the lowercase letters. So this is the password. And when I click login, I can you can see the menu has changed. So there is hello admin and there is the log off button. So I can also log out. Yeah, so the application is now working. It's just a plain web forms application, so you can see all the ASPX pages and things like that. So that's the first step. Just clone the project and run the application. If you have difficulties with running the database, if you are seeing some error messages about that the SQL server is not available, sometimes you need to start it from the developer command prompt. So if you have problems with the database, you can, in the start menu, you can search for developer command prompt for VS 2019. You can run it, and when it starts, you can just try to run SQL local DB start. But if the home screen appeared, it looks like that you have been able to connect to the database, so it should work. So this step is probably, hopefully, it's not necessary. Was it working to all of you, or is somebody struggling with running the application? Okay, seems like it's working for everyone. So let's move on. So I have already run the project using F5, and I've been clicking through the pages. I've tried to add some product in the shopping cart, which is using session, which is quite common practice in ASP.NET Web Forms applications. And we will have to do some additional steps to make it running also in .vvm, but it's possible to use session. So the shopping cart is stored in the session, and I have also been able to log in. So also the forms authentication is working. So that's the web forms part. So now we can add support for .vvm. So there are two packages we need to install. The first is microsoft.owin.host.systemweb, and the second is .vvm.owin. And if you open the slides from the link in the repo, you can copy paste these two commands. So if you go to the repo homepage, so you can use the first link and open the slides and look for the packages, or you can I forgot to add this to the gist. I can what I can do actually is to gist. So if you refresh the page, I'm updating. Yeah, now I have updated the gist. So if you refresh the page with the gist, you will be able to copy paste these two packages. So you can copy paste this, and in the Visual Studio, in the Package Manager console window, if you don't see it here at the bottom in the tabs, you can use the View, Other Windows menu, and there is the Package Manager console, or you can search for it right here. So you can also write Package Manager console right here. Yeah, so it's and there's only one project in the solution, so the default project, it's okay, and you can just enter these two lines. So install package Microsoft OWIN host system web. That's the first package, and the second package is .vvm.owin. So that's the first step to take. Now the Visual Studio is taking some time, so I will show the slide. So open the Package Manager console and copy paste the two lines from the first gist. It's marked 00 packages. So you can copy these two lines and just paste them to the Package Manager console. Make sure that after the first will execute, then there will be the second one. So you need to press enter after the second one. So both packages will be installed. So now the Visual Studio, hopefully, and this is one of the reasons why you want to migrate to .NET Core, because NuGet is much faster on .NET Core. It doesn't need to take 2 minutes until it loads all the package dependencies and asks you if you agree with the license agreement. So now we are just waiting for the NuGet. And just to recap, the first package, it installs the OWIN pipeline next to the web forms pipeline. So when ASP.NET will get HTTP requests from the client, it will put it to the OWIN pipeline. And if it's handled by OWIN or some framework that is integrated with OWIN, it will be handled by the framework. And if there is no middleware in the OWIN pipeline that can handle the request will be passed to the original ASP.NET Web Forms pipeline. So basically, the .vvm will be running in front of the web forms. So if the request is handled by .vvm, it won't go to the web forms part of the application. And if .vvm cannot handle the request, it will go to the web forms part where it will be handled as it was in the past. Yeah. So basically, you are putting one interception in front of the original app. So you can just choose some requests that you will handle. And if you don't want to handle this request, just let it go and it will be handled as it was before. Okay, so now I have installed the first package, and you can see that I need to press enter for the second time. So the second package will install. So the first was Microsoft OWIN host system web. And the second is just the OWIN version of .vvm. So this will install the .vvm framework and the integration layer for this OWIN pipeline. So also we need to wait a couple minutes before Visual Studio decides how to do all the things and how to install them. So while the NuGet package is being installed, I can go to the next step. So we will need to do a couple of things. Because the application is quite large, I want to separate the .vvm stuff from the rest of the application. So I will create a folder that is named .vvm site in the application, and I will place all the .vvm related content in this folder. Yeah, so it will be better separated from the rest of the application because there is a lot of files, a lot of folders. And yeah, so I will create a folder called .vvm site. in this application. Okay, now you see the NuGet packages and references are being installed. There's quite a lot of dependencies of .vvm because of the .NET standard, because the framework targets .NET standard. So it downloads a lot of NuGet packages that starts with the system.something. And basically, these are almost empty packages that are just doing type forwarding from the .NET standard namespaces and classes to the framework namespaces and framework classes. So, for example, the system.link expressions, it's just some type forwarders to the original classes in the .NET framework. So it's not replacing half of the .NET framework with something else. It's just .NET standard stuff. Okay, so packages have been installed. Did this succeeded to you? Have you been able to install the 2 packages?
Yes, I installed them.
Awesome, awesome. So I will continue. So I will be creating a folder named .vvm site. And there are 2 files that we'll need to edit. The first will be .vvm startup. It's a special file that is used by .vvm. So we will need to create this file because it will contain all the configuration of .vvm. And then the second thing, there is the startup CS file, which is already present in the application because it was using Owin for some things. But I will need to configure .vvm here, so I will be registering .vvm in this startup file. So let's do this, all the steps. So I will add new folder in the project, which will be called .vvm site. And it's a good idea if you want to do it, just use this exact same name, also with the casing. So .vvm site, one word, no spaces, and capital D and capital S .vvm site, because in the next code snippets there are some namespaces. So if you keep this name, it will work. Otherwise, you will need to adjust some names. So I've created the .vvm site folder, and then I can go to the gist and take this first large file and copy it, also the gist number 1, and create a .vvm startup file in this .vvm site folder, so .vvm startup. And please use the same name, so .vvm, one word, just capital D, and startup, capital S. And I will just replace anything that's in the default file template, so let's just paste what was in the gist. So now it should work. Some namespaces, that's, yeah. So Visual Studio is just not highlighting these classes for me, but the project is can be built, so it looks like it's a good thing. So we have the .vvm startup, and also we will need to paste some code in the startup CS. The startup is not being created; it's already in the project, so it's here in the root of the project. And I will just take the second gist and I will paste it to the startup file, and it needs to run after the authentication. So there is the call to configure authentication, and I can just paste it here. And now I will need some namespaces to be added. So you will see this light bulb. So you can use the last option. So let's add using .vvm framework configuration. And in this hosting environment, there is also the light bulb. So using system web hosting. So, sorry. This is not a good replacement. this file not visible? It should stay .vvm startup, but I'm not sure why the Visual Studio is not suggesting this. There should be using wingtip-toys.vvm site. And I'm not sure why it doesn't see this. Oh, it's just broken IntelliSense because its build succeeded, so there are no errors, but Visual Studio just displays some errors. It's strange. I will try to clean the solution. Or rebuild, maybe. Okay, so never mind. It's just showing errors, but it can be compiled, so I think that it doesn't matter. So is it working for you?
Yes, it works. Also, I don't have the IntelliSense error, so.
Okay, so Visual Studio is drunk, but it's consistently drunk, it seems. Okay, so I don't know why it doesn't work. It seems some like some Visual Studio issue, because this is just pure C# thing to make. So now we can start the application again and make sure that we haven't break anything, because right now there is no .vvm page or anything like that. So basically everything will be handled by using web forms as previously, but we want to make sure that .vvm didn't break anything. So the application should now work normally.
I have a few questions.
Okay.
I need some assistance.
Mm-hmm.
The packages that you told us to install, they just finished installing now. So what was the step after that?
Okay, I will repeat it. So you can add a folder that is named .vvm site in the project.
Okay.
So this is the first step. It's just for separation of .vvm related stuff.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so once you will have the folder created, then the second step is to create .vvm startup C# file in this folder. So we can just add new file and C# and just paste the gist number 1 into the file. So if you open this URL, it was linked from the repo, from the README, the second link here. So if you open this, you can just copy this .vvm startup contents and paste it here. So that's exactly how the .vvm startup file should look.
Okay.
And then there is the startup CS, and I will edit the gist, so you can just also paste the entire code snippet with the usings. So let me just quickly fix this. So I will place the entire file here and update. And so if you refresh the gist right now, you can just take the gist number 2, and the startup CS file is already in the project. It's in the project root. So if you just take this code and paste it in the startup CS file instead of the content it was there, it should work.
Thank you.
No problem. You're welcome. So I have now run the application, and it looks like it's still working. There's luckily I haven't broke anything. So I can just explain what's contained in those two files we have added. So the first is the startup CS. So there is the configure out method, which was there previously. So it's not a .vvm related thing. It points to some class in the app start which configures the authentication. It was already present in the application. And then we are registering .vvm in the OWIN pipeline using app use.vvm. And we are referencing the startup class, which is the .vvm startup file. So this is our class. And here's the configure method. And there are some few empty methods like configure routes, where we will configure .vvm routes. Then there is configure resources. So if we want to embed some CSS files or some JavaScripts, we would be doing this here. And there's configure controls. So once we will start building our own .vvm user controls, we will be able to register them here. Also, there is a method called configure services, which can be used to register some .vvm specific services. For example, for uploading and download, for uploading files, there is some storage where the files are actually stored. So that's what is this method for example. But right now we can keep these methods empty. And the first method just calls these empty methods. This is just convention. You can do everything in this configure method, but typically we try to separate the things. So that's why I have prepared these empty methods. Yeah, so we have just plugged the .vvm in the OWIN pipeline, and we haven't configured any routes so far. So right now .vvm cannot handle any request because no route is registered for .vvm. So it will just pass all the requests to the ASP.NET Web Forms pipeline. So now I can stop the project because I haven't break anything. And by the way, if you missed some steps, there should also be some branch in the repository. So if you go to manage branches, and look in this remotes, there is the branch 01 add.vvm, which should be exactly in this state. So if you haven't, if you wasn't following some steps, you can get to this state by switching to this branch. You can just double click this. But if your application is working and you have succeeded in installing the packages, you can remain in the master branch. It's not a problem. Okay. So now there is just a convention. In .vvm, we typically use the folders which are named views and view models. It's not necessary. It's just a convention. But if you want to follow this convention, and if you would create a new project in .vvm, these folders would be prepared for you. So you can also create new folders in this .vvm site directory. So I will be creating the views and view models folder here. So the first is views, and the second is view models. This is just convention. You don't need to do it in your projects if you don't like this convention. But we have found it quite convenient. So in the .vvm site directory, create the views and view models folder. Okay, so now we can I think this will be the most difficult step, because the first thing you will typically want to do is to create a .vvm version of the application master page. The master page is basically, in this project, is this site.master file, and it contains the entire structure of all the pages. So there is the head section with some references to scripts and things like that. And there is the body, and in web forms, you need to use the script manager to get some standard references for scripts. And then there is the menu, which is same on all pages. So this large piece of code is the menu. And then there is a list of categories, which is also in the master page. And finally, there is this content placeholder control. And in web forms, this means, for example, basically it's a placeholder where the particular page will be hosted. So if somebody navigates to default SPX, so there is this content, and this content will be basically placed in the master page. So it will go here instead of this content placeholder. And .vvm is using very similar approach. So it's quite convenient. So, but we need to make a similar thing in .vvm. So the first thing we will be doing is to port the master page. And there are some issues we will need to be careful about. The first, I don't have the application run, so I cannot show it. But in the menu, there is the list of categories, which is loaded from the database. So we will need to replicate this thing in .vvm. But luckily, there is the get categories method, which is and when I go to the code, it's just using entity framework. So hopefully we will be able to reuse this method. And also we are listing the number of items in the shopping cart, and we are doing it from the code behind. So there is somewhere here is the code that gets the count of items in the shopping cart and manipulates with some components in the user interface. So this is it, and we need to just port this master page. So what we will be doing is to right-click the views folder we have just created, and we can add new item and select .vvm master page. And the name will be site.dot.master. All the .vvm files has the dot prefix, so it won't be confused with the web forms version, which is just site.master. Yeah, so dot is extra here in the name. So I will right-click the views folder and select add new item. So add new item. And here in this hierarchy, there should be the web and .vvm section. So I need to open this web section and go to .vvm, and I need to select .vvm master page. It should be the purple icon. So this, and I will name it site. Yeah, so the web section .vvm, and there is .vvm master page, and the name should be site. You can name it using a different name, but it would be a little bit confusing because we will be pasting other pieces of code. So I recommend to follow these names. So the site and the extension would be dot master, but it will be appended automatically. So you can just type site. Okay, now this is the window that is present from the .vvm for Visual Studio extension, and it allows us to create a view model. So it follows the convention. So if the master page is in the views folder, the view model will be placed to the view models folder. If the folder is not named views, it will be just alongside the file. So we don't need to change anything in this window. We can just click OK, and the view model for the page should be created. So now you should have the site dot master file in the views and site view model CS in the view models folder. So I can repeat it. So add new item on the views folder. And in the web section of .vvm, we can choose .vvm master page, the purple icon, and the name should be just site. And in the next window, you will just say, OK, don't need to change anything. So that was the easy part. And now we will need to do the complicated part, which is just copy pasting the web forms master page in this file and doing all the changes that .vvm will need. And because it's a lot of steps and it's very easy to do a mistake, so I recommend that you can just watch what I'm doing, and we will have a checkpoint gist, which will be number 12, I hope, and that's what you will finally paste in this file we have just created, and it contains all the changes, but I will explain what I'm changing and why. So just right now watch what I'm doing, and I recommend to focus on this because it's quite a lot of steps. So the first thing is to take the markup of the original web forms page, and we will be pasting it into our ASPX converter. So on our website .vvm.com/webforms/convert, we have a converter application, and it can help us with the conversion. It's not so easy that you would just copy and paste the code in the converter and everything would be done for you, because there are a lot of differences and we cannot cover all of them. But if you go to .vvm.com/webforms/convert, so this is a very simple application. I can paste my markup here. So I will paste the master page content, the web forms master page content. And when I click on continue, I get some recommendations of what I can change in the application. So for example, the content placeholder, ASP content placeholder can be changed to DOT content placeholder. .vvm is using different prefix on the control. So I can just apply this fix. Yeah, so it will change this code I have just pasted. So I will be then able to work with that. Okay, then there is, for example, the image control, and somewhere here. And I can do also some fixes on it. So there is no image URL in .vvm. We have src to follow the HTML convention. So that's it. And also I can change this element because there is no image control in .vvm. We are just using the HTML stuff. So it's changed to EMG. Yeah, so we have just plain EMG and src attribute on it. So that's pretty convenient. And also there is some other issues, and it's repeated 21 times because in web forms on all elements you need to use the run it server. So we don't need to do that in .vvm. So I can click on apply all fixes and it will remove all the run it server. And this tool is still getting new improvements. So over time, I hope that we will be able to do even more transforms to the markup. Right now, we can do about 20 different transformations, but I want to have more and more because some transforms are quite easy to do. Also, there is the step 3, which right now is empty, but in some cases, it will help you to generate a view model. For example, if there's is a text box control here in .vvm, it's practically clear that if you have a text box, you will need a string property in the view model. So this will also help you to scaffold parts of your view model. So that's it. what this tool can do. I will copy the code. I have applied all the fixes, and I can paste it to my site dot master file. The important thing is the tool cannot change the first directive to the .vvm equivalent, so make sure that you will keep the first line unchanged. So I will just take this HTML and replace it with the code I have just copied, and I can remove this web forms thing, but still you can see that some parts of the page are underscored. So let's start transforming them. And it's described in the slide. So if you do want to do it yourself, you can just follow the steps in the slides, and it's all listed here, and you can use the gist. But I recommend that now you just watch, because it's a lot of steps and it's very easy to do some mistakes in them. So first thing, in web forms, we have been using the Modernizer library, and in .vvm we don't need it, because the application is quite old, and Modernizer helps with old browsers to support the application. But I have decided that I won't be using old browsers right now, so let's just remove this scripts render element, because I won't be using Modernizer library at all. All the old browsers are practically dead today, so everything is on Chromium, so I won't need Modernizer. So that's the first thing I can do. The next thing I can do is replace this bundle reference, which is some web forms control, with just plain link to the CSS file here. So that's what I can do pretty easily. I can just take, sorry about that, scrolling. I can just take this link for CSS, and I can use this instead of this control. So for many things in .vvm, you will just revert back to the good old HTML, because .vvm doesn't try to wrap on every HTML element. We have our own components, but if something can be done using HTML, we encourage everyone to do it by plain HTML. There is no need to complicate things further. So the header, it looks quite nice. There is also this data binding, which we will be changing later, but right now it's okay. Okay, now in web forms, all pages need to be wrapped with one global form element. In .vvm, this is not necessary, so I will remove the form, and it ends somewhere. So I will also remove this end form. That's what I can get rid of. Then we have the script manager, and I'm just bundling some JavaScript which will be needed for the web forms. But right now I don't need any web forms stuff here. So all the scripts that are being using by web forms, I can just remove. And MS Ajax bundle, jQuery, Bootstrap, I don't need any of these, because the Bootstrap is included in this bundle. So it's not necessary to reference it once again. And the script manager control, there is nothing like that in .vvm. But you can use other ways to put scripts in the page. I will talk about this later. Okay, so what we have here, it's a menu. It's the top menu of the application. And basically, this is just Bootstrap code. So a lot of divs and things like that. It's not a big deal, and there's not many changes in this. You can see this underscored false value. It's very similar to web forms. Even in .vvm, you can use the visible property on any element. In web forms, it needed to have the runit server. In .vvm, there's no need to use runit server. Everything is runit server, basically. So you can use visible everywhere, but it needs to be data bound. It needs to use the data binding in .vvm. So I would be able to use value.something. So I need to, but in web forms, this was changed from the code behind. Yeah. I want to change this to the .vvm way of doing things. So basically, I want to display the admin link only to the users that are authenticated and that are in the administrator's role. So I will replace this with our component, which is called role view, and roles equals administrator, which means that this content will be displayed only to the users that are members of the administrator role. Yeah, so it's easier than to set visible to true false based on the membership. We just have the role view component. So that's the next thing we have been changed. And this is the login view control, which is also, it's a similar principle. Basically, if the user is not logged in, we will display this content. If the user is signed in, we will display this alternate content. And in .vvm, we have similar control, and unfortunately, the converter right now doesn't support this, so I will need to change this manually. So we have the authenticated view control, which is basically similar to login view. So we have a not authenticated template. Sorry about this IntelliSense issue, not authenticated template. And here we have authenticated template. So that's it. So this is changing the login view to authenticated view. The principle of the control is the same, but we had to change the name to be more meaningful. So that's it. And here we have the login status control. And the login status is a web forms control that can display the logout button. And in .vvm, we don't have a control like that. We have a link button that will render a hyperlink. So, but it's just a button. So I have the logoff button here, and I will be calling a logout function in the view model. So I can remove this login status. And instead of this, I will use the .vvm link button control. So it will render a link. And if you click on it, it will call the logout method in the view model. Yeah. It's not there because I haven't been doing the view model. We have just the empty one here, but I will add this method later. So right now, this underscore under this method, it's fine because I will be adding this method later. Okay, let's continue. So we have this image. It even doesn't even need the ID element. It doesn't need the border style. We will do such things using CSS. So if you want images without the border, just use CSS to style it any way you like. And we have a list view control, which is used to render the list of categories. So basically, it calls the get categories method and renders this item template for all the categories. And in .vvm, we don't have list view. We have repeater. So we can use this repeater control, and also item template and separator template. It's similar. So it's just tiny change in the syntax. What's different is the data binding syntax, because the repeater control, it doesn't have any ID. It can be data bound using the data source property. So we will need some collection called categories in the view model, and the repeater will be bound to this collection. So I will just need a list of categories in the view model, and repeater will load them, and it will work. And here, because it's not defined in the view model, we have the squiggles here, but .vvm is strongly typed. So you have type checks everywhere. So you know that this is not defined in your view model, which is a great thing. It's better than the eval in web forms because it's not compile time checked. In web forms, this is the compiler cannot check if this is correct because it doesn't know the data type. Yeah, so we can do this, and you can use simple expressions in the bindings. So I have the category / plus category name, and it works because simple operations are supported here. You cannot call any functions here, but some functions are supported. Okay, so this is the repeater for rendering the things, and now we will need to fix these data bind expressions because these are also not addressed by the converter. So I will go to the top, and we have this page title. And again, anything you want to display in the page, it needs to be represented in the view model. So I will need a page title property in the view model, and I could use the value binding. So I could use value page title, but since I don't need to change this value while the page is loaded, I can use resource binding, which is more efficient because it will just print out the value and when the page is being rendered. The value binding also emits some JavaScript. So if this page title is changed dynamically later when the page is loaded, it would be addressed here. But for now, I don't need this. Yeah, it's just static. So I can use the resource binding. And again, this is not defined in the view model yet, so that's why it's underscored. Then we have the footer. So I'm printing out the current year. So also it's very easy. The year doesn't change very frequently, so I can just write it out in the HTML. I don't need to have it in the view model at all. Yeah, so that's why I'm using resource binding. And there is the shopping cart, and the number of items in the shopping cart, it was set in web forms. It was set by using the cart count ID. So there was something like cart count.text equals something, something, something. And in .vvm, you don't use IDs to manipulate with the UI, with the controls. You cannot just manipulate with the controls from the view model. You need to use the binding. So we will use this. I will just print the cart and number of items. So I will need some cart count property in the view model. Yeah, so that's why for everything I need to have dynamic in the page, I will declare a property in the view model, and that's it. And the last thing is what I need to change is this. This data binding, it prints the current name of the user. So let's redo it. So there is resource, and I will use context.http context. I don't know why the IntelliSense doesn't work. But it should be user identity name. Yeah, I think that the problem is that somewhere in the page we don't have the view model resolved at all. So that will be probably the problem. But never mind. I believe that this should work. Okay, so let's do this. So this is the checkpoint. So you can now take this gist number 12 and copy paste everything in the site dot master. So that's the complete code of this of the master page. Yeah, so you can take this and copy paste it in the file. Hopefully it will work. But we don't have everything in the view model, so that's the reason why we still have some issues with this page. Yeah. So this gist number 12, it should go to this site dot master, and it includes all the changes I have been doing for the last 10 minutes. Yeah, so this is our checkpoint. So I have just did all the steps, and so this is our checkpoint. So you can take the gist number 12 and put it into site dot master. Okay. So now we will need the view model, and it's the gist number 13. So you can just take the next gist and you can just paste it in the view model, in the site view model file. in the view models folder. So that's it. And I will go through all the things that are present here. And it's strange that it looks like the IntelliSense in Visual Studio is broken because the compilation succeeds, but this should be blue, but it looks like the Visual Studio didn't resolve this type, and also these types are not resolved, but never mind. So in the view model, I will need the cart count, which is the number of items I have in my shopping cart. Also, there is the page title, and I have made it as abstract property because of one of the things that bothered me on web forms was that I forgot to set the page title on all the pages, and there was no compile time check or anything like that. I want all the pages to have the title because the website needs to be indexed by search engines, and pages without a title, they don't have good ratings in the search engines. So the title is very critical for it. And that's why I want to enforce that every page needs to have a title. So the site view model is abstract class, and also the page title is abstract. So every page that will inherit from this site view model, it will be required to override the page title. So all the view models need to provide the page title. Okay, then we have the categories. And it's a collection of objects called, I have named them category DTO. I will get back to it later, but basically it's a list of objects that only define the name of the category, and they can also be ID. But it's a good thing to put in the view models only the fields you will need. So I have changed the get categories method. So we won't be using the category entity from Entity Framework, but because it contains a lot of fields, there is the image and the description and things like that. I don't need that. I just need the category name and maybe category ID. So that's why I have created my own object category DTO. And I am just, this is the same as in web forms, but before returning the categories, I'm just using select, and I'm selecting only the fields I actually need, because it keeps .vvm efficient. And there is the logout method, which just signs the user out and redirects to the main page. Yeah, so if you click the sign out in the .vvm part, we will just sign the user out and redirect to the default page. And it doesn't matter if the user logs out in the web forms part or in the .vvm part, because the authentication is shared between those two frameworks. And the final thing is that I need to get the number of items in the shopping cart and load them in my properties. So in the pre-render method, if it's not a postback, I'm just opening the shopping cart actions. And this is the business logic. This is the code. It was present in the web forms application, and I don't need to change this class at all. I'm just using it. So I'm just asking, okay, give me the number of items in the shopping cart, and I am binding it, I'm setting it to my property in the view model. So it's very similar. And if you look in the code behind in web forms, the logic is very similar. So there is the logout function. I also have its equivalent in the .vvm. Then there is the get categories. I'm using the same code. I'm just projecting to some category DTO, so I will only fetch fields I actually need. So this is even more efficient. And in the pre-render, I'm just using the shopping cart actions, and I'm asking for the number of items and setting them to the cart count inner text, which is in the web forms. In .vvm, I won't be manipulating with the components in the page. I will just set some property in the view model, and I will use data binding to bind the value to the concrete place in the page. Yeah, so this is slight refactoring you will need to do, but it's very similar. Yeah, so I'm loading the categories, I'm loading the number of items in the shopping cart in the pre-render method, and in web forms it's quite similar. There is also some code in the page load. If the user is administrator, we will show the admin link in web forms. In .vvm, we have the role view control, which does everything by itself. So that's a code I could remove from the code behind at all, from the view model. I don't need to have it there because I'm having a special component in .vvm that can do the same thing. And also, in this sample app, there is the cross-site request forgery. This is a thing that it's not needed in .vvm at all because we have the CSRF protection enabled on all pages by default. So in web forms, they are having this code to prevent some kind of attacks for the application. Because using this XSRF attack, you could invoke some actions, for example, deleting items with identity of particular user. So this is basically a prevention against this attack. And in .vvm, this is built in the framework, so you don't need to do anything. So I can just remove this. I can just remove this code completely in .vvm. I don't need to replicate it. Yeah, so it's quite straightforward. I'm just porting these 4 simple methods, and I need to refactor them so they will be written in MVVM fashion. Okay, so now I could try to run the application, but nothing would happen because it's just the master page. I don't have a specific page that would be using this master page yet. So the next step I will be doing is to create a new .vvm page, and we will embed it in our master page. So this will be a way how to try if this actually worked. So what we will be doing is to add new item in the views. So right click on the views directory and add new item. And now you can navigate to the web.vvm section, so the web.vvm, and you can use .vvm page, not master page. This time we will create just the page, and you can name it. I can keep the I can name it test. So it will be some test page we will create just to make sure that .vvm is working. And I can click on add. So web.vvm, select .vvm page, the blue icon, and the name should be test. And in the next window right now, don't click OK because we need to change something. So also we will have the view model created for this page. But I also want to click to embed in master page and select my .vvm master page. So now I said that, OK, I want .vvm page, but it will be embedded in the master page. Yeah, so click on this embed in master page and select the only master page file we actually have in the project .vvm master page. Yeah, so now I can confirm. So it just generated a test.html page, and there is the content control, and it will be embedded in the content placeholder with ID main content. Yeah, so that's it. And I can write some test text or something like that, just to make sure it has been displayed somewhere. And if you look in the test view model, this is a little bit strange because it should inherit from the site view model. So you need to open the test view model, and if there is .vvm view model base, change it to site view model. I think that this is connected to the issue with the IntelliSense in the Visual Studio, which I don't know why it's here, but looks like it has something in common with this, because normally the .vvm extension would just notice that this master page is using this site view model, so it would generate it even here. So I've created the test.vvm page. In the next window, I selected embed in master page and selected this master page. And now I need to open the test view model and change the base class to site view model. So just site view model. Now I can run it. And yes, now the compiler tells me that I need to overwrite the title, which is great because otherwise I would forget that, okay, I have created a page, I need to provide a title. And I hope that I have a gist for that. Oh, it looks like I don't have a gist for that, so I will just add it. So I will provide a gist for this. So sorry about that. I think I forgot to add it. So add it. So it's 13B. I just need to, because the files are ordered alphabetically, so I need to keep the numbers. Okay, so if you refresh the gist, you should see the file which starts by 13B. So this is what should go to the test view model. Yeah, sorry about the issue. I forgot to create a gist for that. So this is what should be in the test view model, and it includes the site view model change. So that's what we can do. And so now we have the .vvm master page, we have .vvm page, and the last thing we need to do is to register a route. So .vvm would start routing the requests not to web forms but to .vvm. So that's the next gist. So if you go to .vvm startup, you can just take this startup gist and it goes to the configure routes method. So I can just take this line and paste it here in the configure routes method in .vvm startup. And now I'm saying that I have a route which is named test, and the URL will be the address of my app /test. So this is the second argument. And it goes to the .vvm site /views/test .dot.html. Yeah, so this is the path to .dot.html file. Yeah, so that's it. I can build it, and right now when I run the application, it should work. So hopefully it will be this. So once again, what I have been doing here. So I've opened the .vvm startup CS file and pasted the gist number 14 in the configure route. So just this single line, config route table add, and I'm registering the test route here. So now I can run the application. And when it starts, it should still work because the default page is still in web forms, so nothing should be different here. But when you add the /test in the URL, it will open our new page, and it will be using the same master page, or it will be using the .vvm master page, but we have been using the same structure, same CSS, so it should be very, very convenient. So if I add test here, so the first request to .vvm takes some time because it's being compiled. And okay, we have a problem with the session, but as you can see, we have got into the, I can go in the call stack, I can go back, and you can see that I'm in my site view model. Yeah, so the request was now handled by .vvm because I have registered the route for it. Okay, so that's the step I need to do. In .vvm, the session by default is null. Yeah, because I need to configure Owen to make the session available in the pipeline. Because by default it's switched off because it's being considered as a not ideal practice for doing things. But I will need it. So that's what we need to do. So if your application is using session, you need to use the gist number 15 and just take it and replace the contents of the startup CS. So the startup in the root, and we can use the gist number 15. And basically there is new code right here. So it's startup CS and gist number 15. And basically these lines will enable session on the Owen handled request. So you just need to copy paste this into the startup if your application is using session. Otherwise, the session wouldn't be available in the .vvm pages. And we have this mentioned in the documentation. So if you need this piece of code, you can just copy paste it from the .vvm documentation. If you will look for .vvm session, you will find the instruction. So this is just copy paste from the documentation. The session is disabled in Owen by default. Okay, so now I will be able to run the application again, and I should now be able to open the test page and it should work. So where's my browser? Okay, it's here. And now when I enter /test, yeah, so append /test in the URL. So also the first request to .vvm takes a few seconds. And now everything is slower in this machine because of the screen sharing, hopefully. So now you can see we have the same menu, we have the same page, and here's our test text. And if you view the source of the page, you can see that it looks very different to what web forms page source looks like, because in web forms there would be the view state, and in .vvm it's not there. .vvm is using different mechanisms to work with the state of the page. If you go to the bottom of the page, you will see the view model, which is serialized here. So you can see the list of categories, you can see the page title, you can see the cross-site request forgery token, which is the default protection I was talking about. And there is the cart count, so this is the number of items in the shopping cart. In release mode of this application, this is much smaller, but in the debug mode, it's formatted so it can be easily read if you need to debug and look what's actually in the view state. Yeah, so there is no view model. Sorry, not view state. We don't have view state in .vvm. Yeah, so that's it. And you can see the transition is very smooth because the menu, it looks exactly the same. We are using same CSS, so the user doesn't even see that we are using different technologies. So, and also this number of items in the shopping cart, it should work, because if I add something in the shopping cart, yeah, so now there is one. And when I go to the test, you will also see there is one. And there is the login, so I can also sign in. When the username is admin, and the password is the password with the dollars and capital P, so capital PA $$ word. So when I log in, so we can see there are some things in the cart, and I have the hello admin here and log off. And if I go to .vvm part, you can see I have also 2 items in the cart And you can see there is also hello admin and log off. So all the features of the menu and all the shared functionality in the master page, it works the same in .vvm. We just needed to port the master page from web forms to .vvm. And right now the application is fully functional, so the users will be able to do anything with that, but it's running .vvm, so you can create new pages in .vvm syntax with full data binding, which is much more convenient than in web forms. So you can extend the application, and eventually you can start replacing some parts of the application. So for example, if I want to replace the about page and get rid of web forms page by page, it will be very easy because now I have the framework set up. I have the master page, so I can now just take one page, rewrite it, deploy the application, so the users will be able to see the change slowly. And of course, during the rewrite, you can also improve the pages, make better user experience. So the application can still evolve while it's being refactored and modernized. So this is a nice combination of things you can really do. Yeah. So that's how the coexistence of .vvm and ASP.NET Web Forms works. And also, for example, if I would like to work with authentication in this test view model, so I can look what user is signed in, and I can display specific content for the user. So right now I have everything set up so I can start porting page by page from web forms to .vvm. And once I get rid of all these pages, I will be able to change the project to .NET Core, because this contents of this folder .vvm site, it should work on the .NET Core without any changes. Yeah, so this is the way how you can eventually get running on .NET Core with faster NuGet, faster compilation times, better performance because of many runtime improvements, and all the benefits of modern .NET platform. So this is the end of our story. I hope that you had enough time to do all the steps. Otherwise, you can use the slides and try to do the migration yourself. And of course, if you have any questions, just let me know and ask anything.
Thomas, like, how will you share the recording?
Sorry?
How will you share the recording?
Yeah, I will post the recording on our YouTube channel. So if you go to our .vvm website, there should be at the bottom, there should be a link to a YouTube channel. So I will, okay, we don't have a link here. Okay, so I will add it here. But maybe if you just type .vvm YouTube, I will upload it on our .vvm YouTube channel, so you can see, you can watch it later, and there will be also the link to the repo and to the gist. So I hope that this was clear. And also there is some news that will be coming in the .vvm extensions very soon, because as you saw, this process of installing .vvm in the application, it's not so difficult. I have been explaining things, and it took less than 1 hour and a half or something like that, or 2 hours. But and if you would do on your own, it could be a lot faster. But we will be adding a special context menu items. So in the next release of .vvm extension for Visual Studio, there will be some option like add .vvm support, which will install the packages and prepare the .vvm startup and startup files for you. So hopefully this will be even easier to start using .vvm in this application. But unfortunately, this feature is not ready yet. But I have been trying the test version we already have, and it works in some projects. So we just need to figure out some issues and this will make some things easier. I think that the most difficult thing is just to port the master page, because you will need to do some changes in the code, and also you will need to go through the code behind and refactor it to the view model. Okay, so if anybody has any questions, I will be very happy to answer. So ask me anything.